What is up, everybody? We are once again getting right back into Reaktor, where we are going to continue exploring the 15 jillion flavors of oscillators that they have in their Nano Pack library. You just jump into the Reaktor interface. You can click anywhere in the interface, hit the enter key, start typing in Nano Oscillator. And when you have the whole library, you have access to all 15 gajillion options. And we last were exploring the analog oscillator. We're going to continue down the line. And today we're going to take a look at the BASIC Shapes Oscillator. What makes this one tick? What makes it different? I can already see what makes this a bit different is that it's got different outputs for the different oscillator types. So now we're going to get into a bit of fun here, because we've been dealing with two oscillator synths the entire time. And now we're going to get into looking at multiple synths. So as you can see, what I had done here was I had hooked up a scope to go pre-filter scope and post-filter scope, because obviously when I'm not hitting the keyboard, these scopes are a bit boring. And then as soon as I hit the keyboard, obviously you get that, you know, that interesting effect. So right now, what I'm doing is, you know, I've got the scope hooked up to just the triangle wave, and I've got this hooked up over here just to this original oscillator. But as you can see, the original oscillator, the scope up here, doesn't actually fire. It doesn't actually move or have any movement until I hit the keyboard. So that's cool. I mean, that gives you that sort of information. And I might actually, let's see, if I color code. No, I like that color actually. So that color right there is post filter. And then just to match the color of the oscillator and the audio path, this color is pre-filter. So basically, pre-filter, you can see that, right, stuff is happening to this oscillator the entire time. Not only is that indicated by the shape here, that's obviously giving us some cool indication that that's what's happening to the shape, but I can literally see the sound coming out of this oscillator and what it's doing. Even when I'm not touching my keyboard, this oscillator is still doing stuff. It's just not being amplified until I hit my keyboard, and that's where the envelope and the amplifier and all that stuff comes into play. So check out the previous videos for how to set all of that up. But just in general, I wanted you guys to be able to have a visual on not only what happens when I hit the keyboard and what that sound looks like, but what's happening before I hit the keyboard, what's actually happening to this sound in general. I've also got a multi-scope here, which is super cool. There's a couple of different scopes here for the mods, and I'll just talk about this for a second before we move on. But there's multiple LFO shapes happening there. And so I've got a mod scope that's basically just showing the different modulation shapes as they're happening. So as I drag these modulation shapes to do different things, this gives you a bit of a visual of what each of those types are actually doing in terms of the type of modulation. So cool stuff. Now, that type of scope is not going to work for today, is it? So let's maybe see if they have a multi-scope. Scopes. So if we drag these into here, then we can see what these waveforms are doing. So I don't know if we actually want to mess with the pitch of that, but at any rate, you can see what these waveforms are doing. And if we adjust the pulse width, you can see what's happening there to the pulse, the type, you know, the different pulse types there. So what I find to be kind of cool is to go ahead and modulate that with some sort of an LFO. So if I drag in, for example, the random one, then you can see that's doing some stuff here to the actual waveform, but we haven't heard it yet. Right now, we're just hearing the first original waveform. So let me turn that down, and then I'm going to patch this in just like I have the other oscillator patch. So I'm going to bring my pitch signal in here from the MIDI from the MIDI in block there. And then I'm going to, let's see, patch this guy into, we might need a mixer, I think, because if we have a mixer, then we can hear potentially all of them at once, which is what I want to experiment with here. So I'm going to, again, just add another, well, we've got an analog mixer on the end. So I'm just going to add a regular mixer in this case. But we've got the scopes there. And then we've got a mixer where we can literally take all the signals and just mix them down into one signal. So this is one oscillator signal coming out here. And I'll just randomly, for now, kind of tuck the volumes of this back. Just experimenting with this right now. This might not be finally how I set it up, but ultimately what we then want to do is pass this into the filter. So first we got to go into the VCA. And it's all of them at once, baby. So as you can see, what I could do is just see what's happening there pre-filter. Okay, so pre-filter, this scope right here is giving you a bit of a visual of what this waveform is looking like. And I can add some more shake to it by turning up that waveform that has all of them. So I would say this is a pretty heavy waveform because it's got a lot of sound coming into it. And actually, it's all being summed together. So that's why I've tucked the volume back. I figured if I had all those volumes at 100%, it would just probably sound way too loud. It would sound unmanageable. But now that I have it here into a mixer, I can actually, if I want more sine, you see I can add more sine to it. And that makes the waveform look a bit more like a sine, even though there's some obvious distortion there. There's some obvious grit to it. If I want it to sound more like a saw, I can add more saw to it. Right? More square wave. So that sounds really cool because you can dial in a really nice thick tone, a really nice thick oscillator sound with that basic multi oscillator, and just doing it in this manner. This is not saying you have to do it in this manner, but I'm doing it in this way so that you can hear what all of it sounds like, and possibly what all of it sounds like mixed together, which is what I'm doing right here. Now, what's the mess? Let's pull all the other ones down and see if we just hear the mess by itself. I like that. That's cool. So that's the mess. I didn't even have that plugged in yet. So if we grab another scope that's just a single, and chuck it right here next to then you can see what the mess looks like. So the mess, that's just the mess by itself. And then, you know, because there's not really a scope here for all of these. But that's ultimately, if I hide these wires, that's kind of what these waveforms look like, each of these, before they're actually ever hitting any amplifier, any filter that opens and closes up the sound or does things to it. So that's what's happening there. And yeah, this is really, really sweet, because now I can dial in any other types of oscillator sound that I want. Make it a real thick bass tone to add some real nice low end, add a ton of sine wave to it. get that, you know what I mean, and mix that in tastefully with different sort of distorted tones, and you get this really, really nice, cool sound. So now, I mean, this is what's happening on, it's all going into channel 3. It's all going into this one right here, which I've got turned up. Now, if we just turn this up as well, and this is the original oscillator now blended back in. It's still on a square tone, so if we change that shape, I think to give it just a little more sine underbelly, maybe tastefully with a little bit of edge to it. But that gives it just a nice low end undertone to allow this one here, the Basic Shapes oscillator, to have a bit more character on top of everything. Oh, that sounds so good. So, Basic Shapes oscillator, and the main difference between this and the main regular oscillator is that this obviously has multiple outputs. So do with it what you will. You mix it together into a monstrosity like this. Use only one or two of them. There's so many different options. You could put a filter after every single one of these. You could build an absolute monster with just this Basic Shapes oscillator. So tons of possibilities there. But I really dig this. I really dig these multi-output oscillators that give you, you know, so many more options to play with there and mix together. So cool stuff. Until next time.